I was standing in that conference room watching Blake hold his coffee cup with this cold smile I had never seen before. The fluorescent lights felt too bright. My hands were shaking. He looked right at me and said the words that would change everything. "You are dead weight, Travis. Clear your desk by 5." The room went silent. Nobody looked at me. Not Greg, not Joel, not even Samantha, who had worked with our father for 15 years. Time stopped. Just 3 months ago, Dad died, and Blake inherited the company. I thought we would be okay. I thought brothers stuck together like Dad always said. But here I was, fired in front of everyone I had worked with for 20 years. I felt like someone punched a hole through my chest. Before I dive into how everything unraveled, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story about betrayal and hidden truths is going to take you on a ride you will not forget. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. Growing up, Blake and I were inseparable. Dad built his industrial equipment manufacturing company from nothing, working 70-hour weeks in a garage in Ohio before moving to a real facility. He used to bring us to work on Saturdays, let us sweep the floors and organize tools. He would always tell us the same thing. "This company is for both of you. You are brothers, you stick together." I believed him. We both did, or at least I thought we did. After college, Blake went into finance, and I chose operations. It made sense. He was good with numbers and strategy. I was good with people and logistics. Dad was proud of both of us. We worked side by side for 20 years, building the company into something that employed over 200 people across 3 states. We had Thanksgiving dinners together, celebrated each other's promotions, stood by each other through divorces and difficulties. That was the life I knew. That was the brother I trusted. Then Dad died. It was sudden, a heart attack at 68 while he was reviewing quarterly reports at home. I got the call at 2 in the morning. Blake and I rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. At the funeral, Blake hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "We will get through this together." I held on to those words like a lifeline. 1 week after we buried Dad, the lawyer read the will. Blake received 60% of company shares and full executive control. I got 40% with no decision-making power. I sat there stunned, trying to process it. Why would Dad do that? We had always been equals in his eyes, or so I thought. Blake noticed my expression and put his hand on my shoulder. "Do not worry, little brother. Nothing is going to change." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But things did change. Within the first week of Blake taking control, he started holding private meetings with department heads without inviting me. When I asked about it, he brushed me off. "Just handling some administrative stuff. You focus on operations." The words felt wrong, but I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Grief does strange things to people. Maybe he just needed time to adjust to the responsibility. Then Blake fired Samantha and hired a new assistant named Kimberly. Samantha had been with Dad for 15 years. She knew every detail of how the company ran, every client relationship, every vendor agreement. She came to my office the day after she was let go, her eyes red from crying. "Something is not right, Travis. Blake has been meeting with lawyers and accountants I have never seen before. He is hiding something." I tried to reassure her, told her Blake was probably just bringing in his own team, but the knot in my stomach tightened. A month after Dad died, Blake called an executive meeting and announced he was laying off 15 long-term employees, people who had been with us for over a decade, people with families, mortgages, kids in college. I objected immediately. "Blake, we cannot just cut these people without discussion. This affects morale, productivity, everything Dad built." He looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "I am CEO now. Travis, these are business decisions. You handle operations, I handle strategy. The other executive stayed silent. Nobody backed me up. I felt like I was disappearing. That afternoon, Greg pulled me aside in the hallway. Greg had been our chief accountant for 12 years, a quiet guy who never got involved in office politics. Travis, I need to tell you something. Blake has been going through your old expense reports. He is looking for anything he can use against you. My blood went cold. Use against me? Why would he need ammunition against his own brother? 2 months after Dad died, Blake called an all-hands meeting. The entire company crammed into the main conference hall. He stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation, his voice confident and steady. We need to restructure. Some divisions are underperforming and we cannot afford dead weight anymore. Then he clicked to the next slide. It was a breakdown of my operations department with red numbers everywhere. Travis has been running operations, but the numbers do not lie. We are bleeding money. I sat there frozen. Those numbers were wrong. My department had consistently met targets. We had actually improved efficiency by 12% over the last year. I stood up. Blake, those figures are not accurate. Can I see the source data? He smiled that cold smile. I will send it to you later, Travis. Sit down. The room felt like it was closing in. After the meeting, employees avoided eye contact with me in the hallways. Joel from sales caught up with me by the elevators. Travis, is it true Blake has been telling people you have been embezzling funds? Are you in some kind of trouble? My hands clenched into fists. That is completely false. I have never stolen a cent from this company. But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in Joel's eyes. Blake had poisoned the well. He was systematically destroying my reputation, and I had no idea why. I tried to access the financial system that night to pull the real numbers, but my login did not work. Blake had changed all the passwords. I was locked out of systems I helped build. The next morning, I confronted him in his office. Why am I locked out of the financial database? He did not even look up from his computer. Security protocols. Too many people had access. It is nothing personal. Everything about it felt personal. Blake called me in for a private meeting that afternoon. His office used to be Dad's. Blake had already redecorated, removing all the family photos and replacing them with modern art that meant nothing. He leaned back in his chair. Travis, I think you should consider stepping down. This is not working out. I stared at him. This is Dad's company, our company. I am not leaving. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. We will see about that. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying every interaction, every decision, trying to figure out where I went wrong. At 3 a.m, I called Marcus. Marcus had been my roommate in college, now a corporate attorney in Chicago. I told him everything. His response was immediate. Document everything, Travis. Emails, meetings, conversations. If he is setting you up, you need evidence. Start building your case. So I did. I started keeping detailed notes. But Blake was always one step ahead. He had already turned most of the executive team against me, already planted seeds of doubt about my competence and integrity. I felt like I was drowning, and nobody would throw me a rope. One night, I snuck back into the office after everyone left. Greg had given me his password, risking his own job to help me. I logged into the financial system and started digging. What I found made my stomach drop. Blake had been altering my expense reports. Legitimate business expenses for client dinners, travel equipment purchases. He had reclassified them as personal expenses. He was building a false narrative that I had been stealing from the company for years. I took photos of everything with my phone and sent them to Marcus. Marcus called me immediately. Travis, this is fraud, but you need more proof before you confront him. We need to be careful. Blake had covered his tracks well, but not well enough. I kept digging and found something else. Transfers to shell companies I did not recognize. Offshore accounts. Blake was not just framing me. He was actually stealing from the company himself. But I made a mistake. I did not log out properly. The next morning, Blake called me into his office. His face was stone. "I know you were snooping around last night, Travis." I tried to explain, but he cut me off. "Save it. I have had enough of your incompetence and your suspicious activities. There will be a board meeting tomorrow. I suggest you prepare yourself." I left his office feeling like the walls were closing in. That evening, Samantha called me. "Can you meet me? I have something you need to see." We met at a coffee shop across town. She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your father gave this to me 3 weeks before he died. He told me that if anything happened to him, and if Blake turned on you, I should give you this." He knew Travis. He knew what Blake was. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting and a USB drive. I did not open it there. I waited until I got home. The board meeting started at 9 in the morning. I walked into that conference room knowing it was a setup, but I had no choice. Blake sat at the head of the table where Dad used to sit, surrounded by the executives and board members he had spent 3 months manipulating. His smile was triumphant. "Gentlemen, I have called this meeting to address serious concerns about Travis's performance and financial conduct." He pulled up a presentation on the screen. Every slide was a lie. Falsified expense reports, manipulated department numbers, a completely fabricated story about me embezzling company funds. The board members looked at me with disappointment and disgust. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain, but Blake kept talking over me. "The numbers speak for themselves, Travis. You have been a liability to this company for years. Dad just could not see it, because you were his son." That felt like a knife to the chest, using Dad's memory to justify this betrayal. Blake stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Effective immediately.